Asexual and sexual reproduction. There are almost 8.7 different species of organisms currently living on this planet. Members of all species must reproduce in order to expand their populations. For all living organisms, from viruses to tigers, two main types of reproduction are possible: asexual or sexual. What is asexual reproduction? Not all organisms have two parents. Some organisms are the result of asexual reproduction and come from one parent. Single celled organisms, like bacteria, tend to stem from the asexual reproduction. Some plants are also derived from asexual reproduction. Several types of asexual reproduction are possible, depending on the organisms. For example, bacteria divide to reproduce in a process known as binary fission. When someone is sick with an illness like strep throat, this means that bacteria have asexually reproduced inside the body of the ill person, known as the host. Other organisms, like yeasts, are able to reproduce themselves through budding, a process by which a new organism grows from a bud attached to the original organism. Interestingly, yeasts are capable of both asexual and sexual reproduction, as are jellyfish. Most organisms, though, can only reproduce by one method, either asexual or sexual. In recent times, another type of asexual reproduction has evolved, known as cloning. Cloning is the genetically engineered creation of an exact copy of an organism. The first cloned animal was a sheep named Dolly, who was born in 1996, but other non animal organisms may also be cloned. What is sexual reproduction? In sexual reproduction, an organism must find a mate in order to reproduce. In most cases, a sperm cell reproduces by the male fuses with an egg cell produced by the female. The resulting gamete will develop into a new organism that contains genetic material from both parents. Although the child has the genes of both parents, its particular combination of traits is unique. The child is genetically distinct from the parents. Birds, mammals, fish, insects, and plants are all examples of organisms that sexually reproduce. Some of these organisms give birth to their offspring, mammals, while many others lay eggs, birds, fish, etc. Asexual reproduction versus sexual reproduction. From a scientific standpoint, is there a type of reproduction that is superior? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each kind of reproduction? Sexual reproduction is viewed by some scientists as inferior to asexual reproduction. This is because sexual reproduction depends on the union of two organisms, while asexual reproduction only requires one organism. Finding a mate is time and energy consuming for animals. Animals have to work to stay alive by foraging for food and protecting their territories, so their time and energy cannot always be devoted to mating. Therefore, asexual reproduction is a far more expedient process that leads to a greater number of offspring than sexual reproduction generally can. On the other hand, because there are two organisms involved in sexual reproduction, there will naturally be more genetic variation in the species. Remember that while children produced sexually and genetically different than their parents, asexually reproduced organisms are like copies of the original organism. If the parent has a damaging trait, their offspring will too. As a result, asexual reproduction has a hard time weeding out potentially weak traits. When the environment changes or becomes unstable, it is especially important that the population is varied. Otherwise, it is at risk for extinction. Which side wins? The answer is that both asexual and sexual reproduction have pros and cons. Neither can be called superiors, as they both have their individual advantages and disadvantages.